So essentially, what we have, we're going to be diving in some of the most urgent development shaping global geopolitics right now. From drones shutting down Denmark's main airport to new U.S.-Russian flashpoint, from Trump latest comments on Ukraine to NATO. Let's talk about all these things. This warning from Moscow over the airspace violation. This is becoming a thing. The world feels it is moving closer to a new Cold War moment. How could this be happening? How could this be happening? I thought we had this whole situation with Ukraine and Russia more or less taken care of. At least nothing, back and forth the usual. No, not any longer. First of all, we're going to talk about what's going on with Denmark, which is under pressure. We'll start with Denmark. Just days ago, Copenhagen Airport was shut down for hours after multiple large drones entered its airspace. Danish leaders called it the most serious attack on their critical infrastructure yet. While no one has officially confirmed it, suspicions point strongly towards Russia. And this isn't just about drones. Denmark is also making its biggest defense purchase ever, choosing European air defense over US Patriot systems, signaling a major shift in NATO procurement politics. So Denmark was the first one. It appeared that there were drones flying over Copenhagen airport in Denmark. That's a NATO country. Russia said that's a misunderstanding. Second, there's a U.S. and Russia escalation. Meanwhile, U.S.-Russia relations are deteriorating. The last arms control treaty, the New START, is at risk of expiring in 2026, which means NATO is stepping up warnings after repeated Russian airspace violation near Poland and Estonia. What's going on? And diplomatic talks that were supposed to cool tensions are being cancelled. The stage is being set for more confrontation, not less. Number 3, Trump and Ukraine. Trump is making headline with Ukraine today with a major shift on Ukraine. He now says that Ukraine can win. Trump says that Ukraine can win back all the territory that it took from Russia since 2022. What? And even called Russia a paper tiger. He's also criticized Europe for continuing to buy Russian energy, saying it undermines the entire sanction effort. But at the same time, he has been careful not to commit U.S. forces. And even when supporting NATO rights to shoot down Russian jets violating Allied space. So basically say, listen, if they invade your airspace, shoot them down. What are you waiting for? And I think that Ukraine can win this thing after all. And don't forget, a couple of days ago, there were drones literally that flew into Poland. And there were flights, Russian flights not too long ago. Right? In September 19 to the 9 to the 7, the 9 and 10 September 2025, about 19 to 23 drones, allegedly Russian, entered Polish airspace. The drones essentially were flying there. And Russia said, I don't know what you're talking about. The drone drifted or were flown deep into eastern, central, and northern Poland, traversing hundreds of kilometers in some cases. Poland scrambled jets. Some drones were shut down, at least 3 confirmed. Poland invoked NATO Article number 4. NATO has responded with heightened alertness. They're basically saying, okay, so let's get some planes over and let's fly over and see what's going on. But the question is this. Is it enough? Is it enough? Then, before you know it, Russian military flights over Estonia airspace. Right after that, they did it again. Violation near the Baltics, more generally connected very directly to a Brzezinski geopolitical framework, as we talked about it once before. So it's airspace violation as political messaging. Then Very recently, the Copenhagen airport, a bunch of drones have flown over. And Poland has stated they will shoot down Russian airplanes and missiles if they fly over Poland. This is getting serious. So suddenly this thing is out of control. I thought, we were fine. There was this Ukraine-Russia situation where they were talking back and forth. And, they were fighting, they were losing, they were sending some drones, and it was just between the two of them. But suddenly, we're getting involved in NATO countries. They're being tested. That is not unusual. And then to make, this matter is Trump basically, on the Copenhagen-Oslo drone incident, Trump criticized Russian leadership. What has he said? What is he saying? What is the issue? Well, frankly, what he's done, he said on the Copenhagen-Oslo drone incidents, Trump criticized Russian leadership, referring to Putin's action as bad leadership after the Danish prime minister mentioned possible Russian involvement. On Europe, in his speech at the UN today, Trump called out European countries for continuing to purchase Russian energy. He's saying to them, listen, stop buying oil. I cannot stop this on my own. You've got to stop buying the Russian oil because you're feeding the war. And that's a problem. On Denmark, I don't find any direct quote, but basically on Denmark choosing European air defense over U.S. Patriots. He shifted his position on how he says that Ukraine can reclaim all the territory Russia took into the invasion. He described Russia as looking like a paper tiger. You are a paper tiger. Therefore, you're not so bad after all. So, what's really going on here is you have a good old-fashioned escalation. We are slowly moving up the tension. We are slowly moving up the pressure. But short of committing U.S. forces, but you know what? All depends what you think. All depends what you think what the U.S. is actually going to be able to do and what Russia is trying to do. Is Russia trying to invade anyone? No, obviously not. What they're doing, and they're basically testing the resolve of NATO, right? And that means that as they're testing their resolve, they're seeing what works and what doesn't work. Now, of course, you have to be careful, right? Because if Poland decides to act on what they say, which means basically if there is a flight of a Russian, if this flight of Russian jet fighters over Poland, they will shoot them down. Now, can they actually do that? I'm not so sure because they would need to involve NATO. But they may decide to shoot it down. And then before you know it, Russia could use this as a reason to say, you see, I couldn't trust NATO. They just attacked me for no reason. Are they trying to get it on? No, don't forget. Russia is now a war economy. So they're not going to be able to pull this thing back. They need another outlet. They need something else to do. And of course, Trump has changed his attitude completely today by essentially stating that, Ukraine could win. So basically, I am going to give weapons, he sell the weapons to the Europeans that would in turn give it to the Ukrainian and therefore help them win this war. It's possible that Ukraine could win now. Of course, you say why, he's changing his mind again. Well, but you know what? This is how you make deals. You don't let them rest. You don't know exactly what you're going to do next. But of course, this is dangerous, right? Because, this is how accidents happen. And what do you do if there is an actual accident of a real plane that flies over Poland and they get shot down? What is Russia going to do? Invade Poland? Don't forget, not the greatest of friends. Not the greatest of friends. And this is something that is always concerning. And it goes back to Brzezinski, his principle written long ago about what should be the strategy of the U.S. towards that. What should the U.S. be doing? What is it that is concerning? Well, Brzezinski essentially said that in the 70s and the 80s, and he stated that, his view, right? Russian and Eastern Europe, his warnings about Russian attempts, and that was in the 70s, although he died in 2017. This is old news, but it's still very relevant today for you to understand what is going on. His warnings about Russian attempts to dominate its neighbors feel prescient after the invasion of Ukraine and what you're seeing now. Russia might be testing and pushing to say, let's go on to the next level. He believed an independent, Western-aligned Ukraine was essential to prevent Moscow from reasserting imperial influence. And that is being tested. He also talked about the Chinese rise, the Middle East, the grand strategy, right? But basically said you got to keep Russia under control because they have aspiration again. And that aspiration may come at the expense of NATO and the European nations. Now remember, this is not, key developments. There was a drone incursion in Copenhagen airport. Several large unidentified drones flew over Copenhagen airport, forcing it to shut down for about 4 hours. They're going to try to figure out what's going on, but they are not so sure. Okay, the Danish Prime Minister has the most serious attack on Danish critical infrastructure. The Oslo airport saw a similar disruption around the same time. That's kind of interesting and very coincidental. While no one has officially confirmed Russia is behind this incident, Danish authorities haven't ruled out possible Russian involvement. Capable operator description given by Danish police suggests this may be more than just random or amateur activity. Yeah, it is far away, but these are, $20,000 drones. Denmark has decided to purchase long-term precision weapons to bolster its deterrence against threats. Now, you should know that Denmark is hosting a Ukrainian facility, to produce missile fuel for Ukraine. This has drawn hostile reaction from Russia. Coincidental. Okay, this matters because these incidents show that Denmark is increasingly perceived threat, not just in traditional military terms, but in hybrid ways: drone, airspace violation, critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. You see, what's happening is the war is not happening the way everyone thought it would be happening, right? You have tanks and you got soldiers and you got drones. When Russia sends 19 drones over Poland at a cost of $20,000 each, and you're sending missiles worth $500,000 each, or you're scrambling airplanes at several millions of dollars, it's no match. Yeah, let's send 500 drones. Who cares? That's going to keep them busy for a while. They are going to be confused, and they are going to lose a lot of money and a lot of effort. Meanwhile, we see how they're reacting. So Denmark is making choices that reflect broader European concern about autonomy and supply chains and all that. They are getting ready. Then you had these were Russian military flights over Estonia airspace. Right? Russia wasn't so keen on saying exactly what happened, but NATO Article 5 and the Brzezinski legacy strongly supported NATO enlargement to include Estonia and other Baltics. His reasoning: only the hard security guarantee of Article 5 could deter Moscow from military intimidation. When Russian jet violates Estonian airspace, NATO scrambles aircraft in response, although at a very expensive way of doing it. So Brzezinski warned that Russia, 1975. That Russia would engage in Salami tactics, small, repeated provocation designed to erode the Western resolve. You know, we have Denmark, and then we have Estonia, right? I mean, a single airspace is not an act of war, but several of them. This is precisely the type of gray zone challenge Brzezinski thought the U.S. and its allies must stay vigilant against, or risk undermining the credibility of deterrence. Maybe Russia needs a reason to get in there. Yeah, shoot one of my airplanes, shoot one of my drones. I didn't do anything. I don't know what you guys are doing. None of this is happening. You are making it up because, and that's the reason why I want NATO to stay away from me, right? I mean, after all, if Canada tomorrow decided to have Chinese airplanes in Canada, I don't think the US would like it either. Okay? So they need to move on to the next stage. Maybe Russia realizes, I think what's happening, I think that Russia realizes that the noose is getting tighter around its neck because essentially the US is asking all these countries to stop buying oil from Russia. Okay? And it's starting to work. Belgium is going to stop, not directly, but indirectly, but it's going to impact Russia. And Russia is slowly getting weaker because that war is going on and on and on. Now, what's going to happen at some point, their resolve is not going to be as strong as it is today against Ukraine, especially if the Europeans are, don't forget, the Europeans right now are rearming. I mean, they're not going to be ready tomorrow, but by next year, they're going to be able to say and do something and help Ukraine even more, with or without the US. So it's propping up. So if you're going to start something, maybe it's now is the time to start it and push them back. So yeah, shoot one of my planes and then we move on. And then I say, well, that's the reason why I don't want NATO. Therefore, I am going to invade and protect. And then, of course, once the shooting starts, all bets are off. The question is, who's going to do what? Is NATO willing to do what it needs to be done to stop Russia? Will the U.S. get involved? After all, Article 5, you got to get in there. If one attack for one is an attack for all. Don't forget that Russia is a war economy. Russia is a war economy. What that means, it means that they're spending all of their money. All of the economy is being spent towards war, towards building weapons and buying drones and making deals with Iran, with China, right? They need to prop it up. And they just can't go home and that's it. Unless you give them what they want, but they ask for something so egregiously ridiculous and they're not making any effort for peace, you have to wonder, what are they up to? Well, what they're up to is they want to keep going, and they want to, at least if you want to give them what they want, well then fine, make it worth my while. Otherwise I keep going. And you're not ready for me. And the reason we know that, not a big secret, but the head of NATO has said that Russia is in fact very well prepared and much more better armed than NATO at this point. They're making more missiles, more weapons, more tanks than NATO, even though it's a smaller country, but it's a war economy. And for years, the NATO and the Europeans haven't spent much money on their defense. Now they're starting because, JD went over there and said, listen, you got to spend money on your own because we're not going to help you. But the point is now they're catching up. But if you're Russia and you want to hit it while it's warm. Hit it now while you still have, because eventually it's going to be much more difficult. But hit what? Do what? Invade Poland? Well, do something. Push them to the resolve, because remember, they were getting together and they were willing to put troops in Ukraine. So they are inching very slowly, but very surely closer and closer to Russia. And Russia said, I will shoot down any troops, even with or without a peace treaty, that goes into Ukraine, even if it's a peacekeeping force. And of course, the Europeans are saying, well, I want to were willing to do it, and they all agreed. All 26 countries have agreed to actually go in the middle, but they say we need the security guarantees from the U.S. The U.S. in turn say, yeah, we will offer security guarantees, but doesn't mean we're gonna, send the boys in there. No way. We're gonna maybe fly over or whatever. But then the U.S., as in the administration, basically say, well, but hold on a second. What I would like you to do as well, besides waiting for us to provide the security guarantees, I would like you to stop buying oil from Russia. Do something more credible. Do something more interesting. Do something that's going to actually hurt the Russians through their pocketbook. And the Europeans have kind of started doing it, but they really haven't been that successful at this point because, frankly, it's not an easy thing to do because it's going to cost them more money and the oil and all that. But they have to do it because now what Russia is doing, they realize that the options are closing in fast. And they really can't go back. I mean, you could stop here and take what you can and solidify the gains. But they're also thinking, man, I could get a little bit more territory here. There are regions that they want, certain regions that they are not even in it. Right? There's certain region in Ukraine that they want and they haven't invaded. And they want that too. Plus they want to keep what they have. That's a little tough to swallow at this point. And they're not being yes. Well, in that case, great. Then I keep going. Because the alternative for Russia, which is basically to go home, that is not a real alternative. Russia is a war economy. And you don't take back a war economy that easily. And as far as the strengths of Russia, you have to understand that even though NATO is 25 times bigger than Russia, it's 50 trillion versus 2 trillion, right? The result is a Russian defense industrial base that is expected to roll out 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles, and 200 ballistic and cruise missiles this year alone. By comparison, do you want to know what the U.S. Do you want to know what the U.S. construct just 135 tanks per year and no longer builds Bradley fighting vehicle? Okay, the U.S. Army General Cavoli, NATO Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that Washington expects Russia to produce 250,000 artillery shells monthly. The U.S. now makes about 40,000 artillery shells. That is not a lot. That is not enough. That is not fast enough. And that is going to be a situation that needs to be resolved pretty soon. Meanwhile, the European has pledged to hit a manufacturing capacity of 2 million rounds a year, okay, or about 167,000 a month. But this only going to reach this by the end of 2025. Hello, Australia. So its leaders at the end of 2025, and I think that's what's happening. Russia is seeing that they are getting closer and they're getting readier and they're getting prettier and they're getting faster, and they need to do something. Either they could say, you know what, I'll take whatever you have. I'll take whatever I own, whatever I'm on right now in Ukraine, I'll take. I'm not going to take the region that I don't have. But obviously no, because then that means that everybody needs to go home. And going home is going to be very difficult. And Russia right now, the Russia forces are ready and resilient. Now, can they keep on going? Can they keep doing it? They have a huge amount of manpower. Ammunitions are crucial, but is there manpower there to use it? Yes. Yes. You know, active duty personnel in Russia is approximately 1 million versus with 1.5 reservists. And don't forget, they've been fighting for 2 years. Not so sure if Europe, let's put it this way. This deployment limitation, despite having higher totals, right? Europe basically struggles to deploy significant forces abroad. For example, there was a plan for 64,000 strong peacekeeping force, right, for Ukraine. It was scaled back because they could barely commit 25,000. Okay. Now Ukraine is mobilized, but how long can they sustain the onslaught? It's becoming more and more difficult. I mean, Ukraine does have the manpower right now, but for how long? And frankly, the story is that people don't want to fight in Ukraine anymore. They want to go home. And for Russia, like I said, your Russia is basically a war economy, and but the thing is, all right, fine, then stop fighting, take your thing, and go home. You become you don't be a war economy. Take what you have and go home. The thing is, and this is why I think this is not stopping where it is. Russia economy has become heavily centered on wartime production, with defense spending, industrial subsidies, overextended, right, and military-focused employment taking precedence. This system is becoming deeply entrenched and overextended. You know, it's like it's ingrained in their way of life now. In 2025, defense and security costs accounted for about 41% of government spending, the highest level since the Cold War. You don't switch that thing off just like that. The National Wealth Fund, once a fiscal buffer, has shrunk dramatically from roughly 11 trillion rubles in 2021 to under 3 trillion, causing serious concern about long-term fiscal stability. Why do you think Russia went to China and China now is financing? Yes, there are signs of economic strain for Russia. You know, the GDP rebound that you saw, driven by wartime spending, is losing traction. That's what's happening. They're losing traction slowly. So Russia is saying, we're not going to be able to keep this up forever. We got to do something else. But at the same time, there's an over-reliance on military production, which has chipped away at civilian sectors. Inflation is climbing. Labor shortages are worsening. Russia's economy is increasingly dependent on China and other Western partners that bypass their sanction. We need the oil, but if you get the oil, what are you going to do? So even if the hostilities, analysts caution that the war economy model will be difficult to unwind. You just don't go home. You just don't stop and say, okay, this is it. We're not fighting anymore. No. Military industrial entities and vested interests are now deeply woven into the national economy. We're making too much money. You know, it's like with the Iranians, right? What did they build the bomb to bomb Israel? Well, that's the official wording, but at the end of the day, they built a bomb because I think they made like $3 trillion worth of expenses. It's to enrich themselves, the people around, you know, the Iranian Republican Guards, their family, their businesses, their tank, the oil, the concrete, you know, all that money that goes in to build these huge facilities is to enrich themselves. Of course, they don't do it just for the sake of it. They say, well, we're gonna destroy Israel, but that's never gonna happen, right? So these people are in to make money, and these people in Russia are in to make money, and they're not gonna see it all go away. They say, yeah, keep fighting. Right? Democratic poses a critical challenge. There is significant brain drain among skilled professionals and an aging population. Is a shift possible? Yeah, transition from war-driven economies is not imminent. The economy is structured to keep the war machine moving. They got to keep this thing moving, even at the expense of civilian welfare. You have shrinking fiscal reserve, weakening civilian sectors, entrenched interests. I mean, a potential exit strategy exists if you have ceasefire peace, rational economic calibration, and international integration. It's not going to be easy, even if Ukraine says, you know what, take what you have and go home, and we have a peace treaty, and that's it. Then what? What are you having really? You have a buffer, fine, but at what cost? There's no gold and oil in these regions that they've taken. Then everybody's got to go home. Doing what? You gotta pull that machine back. You gotta slow everything down. That's gonna be a lot of damage for the Russians. So therefore, in a very calculated Machiavellic kind of way, you're saying, you know what, let's keep going. But what do you mean let's keep going? How? Wow. We gotta expand this conflict, and we're gonna pressure the Europeans to fight with each other and to say, do you really want to protect us? Are you really out there to do it? Right? Because if you're not, do you really want to fight Russia right now? Europe is not ready. Europe is not ready. And this could happen very quickly. Poland recently warned. Poland has warned that if Russia jets fly over their country, they will blow them up. If that happens, Russia could say, well, it's war. I didn't do anything. You guys are picking on me. Don't forget this technique. This is not new. This is not new stuff. This is like no one has seen before. Brzezinski from the 70s had perfectly defined and described these type of interaction. The Salami approach, where I'm attacking here and then here and then here and then there, and you don't know what's going on. Then you say we have to protect ourselves. Well, we're not going to go to war. I mean, are you crazy? It's going to look like Ukraine. Everything is destroyed. We're going to lose men, and then we're going to have to start bringing the army and then fighting. But the Russians are ready, and they have, like I said, look how many weapons they're producing. A lot more weapons even than the U.S. tanks, and of course, in the meantime, Russia is building up. Don't forget, those drones are all over the place. So the question is going to be, where is this going to end? And things are getting worse. Things are getting worse. Why? Well, airspace violation and NATO responses. There have been multiple incidents of Russian military aircraft or drones entering the airspace of NATO members. Poland, Estonia, Denmark, right? Prompting stronger warnings. But that's all you're getting right now. Say, please don't do that again. Please don't do it again. Please don't do it again. We're gonna get mad soon. We're gonna do something, but stop doing it. And he has done it 3 times. Of course, you have to prove it, right, that they actually did that. It's a strain on arms control agreements, because at the same time there was what we call the New START Treaty. It's the last major U.S.-Russia arms control pact. It's set to expire in February of 2026. Russia is willing to extend it for 1 year, but negotiations have reported being difficult, and inspections have been suspended because of what's going on. Maybe you say, you know what, we're gonna let it expire, and then I could start building nuclear weapons. Efforts at diplomatic communications have been uneven. For instance, the U.S. has canceled some rounds of tension easing talks. Both sides are signaling more strongly in public statement, and NATO has explicitly warned Russia about defending its airspace and territory, invoking treaty obligation. We are going to shoot you down. But I didn't do anything. I did not do anything. Why are you picking on me like that? Okay, is this how you want it? Let's go to town. I got 1 million men waiting in the back. Okay, are you ready for me to come through? Because you're attacking me, and I will go to China to help me out, because obviously they've been helping me out all along. And frankly, do you want to test China right now? And no one has really stopped developing nuclear weapons. No, of course. I mean, you only need 2 of them. You don't need 1,500. There have been steps in trying to restoring and normaling the diplomatic channels. But what's happening, frankly, is but Russia is not stopping. Russia is not stopping, and the reason they're not stopping is, one, they've done some exploratory work, which is that's what they did. Remember in 2014, they were doing the Green Man, and they were going, and before you know it, well, they got Crimea, and nobody wanted to fight it. Obama did not want to say or do anything about it because, and don't forget this attack, this 2022 attacks against Ukraine, they were supposed to be protected by security guarantees, which China actually signed. But when it when it came down to it, they said, well, actually, when we meant security guarantees, we didn't mean we're going to fight in case somebody attacks Ukraine. What we're going to do is we are going to complain, and we're going to do sanctions, but we're not going to fight for you. And they gave up all their nuclear weapons. So, Russia, remember that. They seen what happened in 2014. And they kind of put the tanks together, right? They were lining up. And then Biden said, don't. And he says, yeah, well, never mind. Went in there, and that's it. That's where we are today. Of course, you're going to say, well, what does that have to do with the U.S.? Well, that's a black swan right there. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Right? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because what we do is we look for black swan. We look for things that potentially could go bad. Right? And what could go bad here? Well, we could have a war. Well, but it's Poland and Denmark. Who cares? No, you have to care. You have to care because essentially these people that are fighting, against Denmark, it's part of NATO, and the U.S. is part of NATO. The U.S. could be drawn into a war against Russia. Right? Great. They were doing so well. The stock market is up. The economy is doing great. And now you're getting a war into Russia. Why do you think this is happening? This is happening for the simple reason that Russia has no choice. Right? The Europeans are moving up in power. They're building their weapons. They're willing to go between Russia and Ukraine, right in the middle. The U.S. is uncommittal, but they haven't said. And today, of course, I mean, you do know what Trump said, and let me tell you what Trump said. And essentially, what he said today, he criticized Europe, but basically he shifted his position, and now Ukraine has said that Ukraine can reclaim all of its territory. That is that's a first. That's a first. He described Russia as looking like a paper tiger, highlighting that the war has dragged on much longer than many anticipated, and that Russia is not as strong a position as some thought. As they thought. Trump has also praised Ukraine's performance on the battlefield, saying that Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this very large army. He noted that many had expected the war to be over quickly. He has called out nations, especially NATO and EU, for still buying Russian energy, saying it undermines the pressure on Russia and helps to finance the war. You've got to stop whatever you are doing. But having said that, Russian forces are ready and resilient. Active duty personnel in Russia is about 1 to 1 million. Right? There's a conscription backup. Russia maintains a functional system. Recruitment momentum. Reports show Russia exceeded what's going on. So this situation is getting a little bit more complicated than everyone thought. And it would appear that the worst is about to happen. right? The worst is about to happen. What do we mean by the worst? Well, the worst, I hate to tell you, my dear subscribers um, and members, don't forget to be a member of the channel as well to help it out. They're going to get in. There's going to be an accident. Someone is going to shoot someone else and something is going to happen. What could happen? Well, Poland say I'm going to do something, and Russia is basically out there poking and poking and poking but this is not unusual. This is a Brzezinski method, right? That's what they do. They are all about doing what they think is going to be the best thing to do for them. They can't go back and they can't go forward, obviously, so they're stuck. So they're trying to find another way, and that's why they went into Estonia, they went into Poland, they went into Denmark, trying to pick their resolve. And if for some reason you decided to shoot one of the Russian plane, then we've got to get in there. We've got to get in there. So let's monitor this situation very, very carefully.